So I propose that the federal government reduce the risk posed by these troubled assets and supply urgently needed money so banks and other financial institutions can avoid collapse and resume lending. This rescue effort is not aimed at preserving any individual company or industry. It is aimed at preserving America's overall economy.
Basically, the government called on these firms to help stabilize the economy, and Blackrock, led by a very well-connected billionaire Larry Fink, he was chosen to manage the Federal Reserve Corporates Bond Buying Program. This program was aimed at preventing a financial crisis caused by the pandemic. But just like in 2008, BlackRock's appointment was kept secret and there was no competition to get the job. Critics pointed out that BlackRock had conflict of interest since they owned shares in some of the biggest companies that were getting bailed out. Despite this, BlackRock still had a lot of power to shape economic policy during the pandemic. BlackRock roles in the pandemic bailout brought an attention to close relationship between Wall Street and the government. Even some critics say that this relationship creates a revolving door where people and companies move easily between government and industry jobs.
Even more this afternoon, they are talking about the details of their corporate bond purchases and buying corporate debt ETFs, the unprecedented move driving an explosion.
As I mentioned, the Fed 2 weeks ago began buying individual corporate bonds, and we just got granular detail about what types of purchases it made yesterday.
So you want to know who the US Federal Reserve hired to manage their schemes to buy corporates bond during the pandemic? Well, they hired a money printer. This whole thing was basically a bailout for corporations that had too much debt to handle because of the pandemic. And guess who got the job? It was BlackRock, the same company that owns some of the biggest stake in this corporation that were being bailed out. It's all a bit sketchy.
Keep in mind, though, these are just the top 10 holdings. The whole list, which the Fed has published on the New York Fed website, includes 794 companies. So yes, these are just the top 10 by holdings, but there are hundreds of other companies that could be part of the Fed's portfolio as well.
Have you ever heard of Larry Fink? He's probably one of the most powerful dude in the post-bailout and post-pandemic economy. But the crazy thing is, most regular people have never even heard of him. He's the big boss of BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in the world with over $9 trillion under their management. And yet, BlackRock barely made any headlines when they are accused of buying up single family homes. That's because Larry is smart, he intentionally keeps a low profile, he's been building BlackRock over 33 years and now he's one of the most powerful men in the game. BlackRock's manage assets for all sorts of clients, from regular people's retirement accounts to big short companies and even entire countries. They are invested in some of the biggest companies out there like Apple, Microsoft, Facebook and Wells Fargo. To give you an idea how massive they are, the 300 biggest pension funds in the world only hold collectively $6 trillion, while BlackRock manages $9 trillion all on their own. And if you combine the three biggest asset management firms in the world, they control a whopping $15 trillion. That's equivalent to almost 70% of entire US economy. And yet, Larry Fink, he stays behind the curtain and doesn't make a lot of public appearances. Some people even call BlackRock the world's largest shadow bank, and they might just be the company that owns the world. When Larry asked by Bloomberg if he's the most powerful guy in finance, and he was all like, I don't think of myself as powerful, but let's be real, managing $9 trillion in assets is pretty darn powerful. But does BlackRock really own the whole world? Well, it's kinda complicated. They are definitely one of the biggest players in the game with all sort of clients and investment in all sort of companies, but they are not exactly running the show all by themselves. There are plenty of other big financial players out there too. So it's not quite as simple as saying that BlackRock owns the world, but they are definitely a major player in the global economy. BlackRock has some seriously impressive stats. They have been called the most influential financial institution in the world. And at one point, they had $4 trillion under their management, which is more than the biggest bank in China. But since then, they have doubled their assets to over $9 trillion. And it's not just they have a lot of money. They also own shares in some of the biggest companies in the world, and they are involved in all sorts of industries. But the question is, why would someone build something this massive? Maybe it's just because they can, or maybe there's some other reason behind it. Whatever the case may be, BlackRock is unquestionably a major player in the world of finance. Larry is a guy who always wanted more and was known to be obsessive about control. He knew the market inside and out and was considered a master of business. However, it wasn't until he suffered a massive 100 million loss that he really started to make it big. Larry studied political science at UCLA and got his start on Wall Street at just 23-year-old. His background in politics would later prove valuable as he became a key middleman between Washington and Wall Street. He got offers from some of the top investment banks but chose to work at First Boston, where he helped to develop the mortgage-backed security market. These securities were seen as innovative at the time, but now we all know that they played a major role in the 2008 financial crisis.
What could I have done differently? This is a pain that will stay with me for the rest of my life. That's all.
Despite this, Larry's reputation as a mastermind in the investment world only kept growing, and he received lots of recognition and praise for his skills. But then disaster struck. Larry lost a whopping $100 million for his company due to a missed call on his part. His trades were wiped out, and the hedge he put in place to offset those losses also failed. Suddenly, Larry went from a being hero to a liability that no one wanted to touch. It just goes to show you, even the best and the brightest can have their moments of failure. So after losing $100 million for his company and getting kicked out, Larry Fink didn't give up. He used that failure as a motivation to never make the same mistake again. So he co-founded Blackstone Group with Stephen Schwarzman, which grew to $20 billion under management in just 5 years. But due to some differences with Schwarzman, Fink left Blackstone and founded Blackrock, which went public for $375 million in 1999. And in 2004, it merged with Merrill Lynch, with adding $500 billion to BlackRock's assets. And today, BlackRock manages a whopping $9 trillion in assets. But what's really impressive about BlackRock is their software platform called Aladdin, which is basically a supercomputer they use to manage their clients' investment. Aladdin is a network of 5,000 computers BlackRock uses to monitor millions of trades and analyze their clients' portfolio 24 hours a day to perform risk analysis. It's so widespread that it's basically the central nervous system for many of the largest players in the investment management industry. This high-end computer farm literally goes every possible scenarios and pinpoints anything that could possibly go wrong, allowing their clients to make the best investment decision. And it's through Aladdin that BlackRock actually oversees more like $21 trillion worth of assets instead of just $9 trillion. BlackRock has an eye on equivalent of at least 10 of all the stocks and bonds in the world. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit, and it was a big one. The banks were in trouble and needed help. So who did they turn to? It was BlackRock. The New York Fed reached out to Larry and asked him to manage $30 billion in toxic assets from Bear Stearns. Then they brought BlackRock in to advise them on how to handle the $100 billion of toxic assets from AIG. To top it off, they even hired Blackrock to deal with the $301 billion of Citigroup's assets. All of this was done without any competitive bidding and behind closed doors. Larry was more powerful than ever, going from being the laughing stock of finance to being the linchpin between Wall Street and Washington. As one bank executive said, Larry has always wanted to be important, and now he's more important than he ever dreamed of. And he's loving it. In the end, BlackRock made at least $200 million of this contract. The massive size of these contracts and secrecy surrounding them, along with BlackRock's enormous influence, started getting people talking. Some even compared BlackRock to infamous private military contractor during the War on Terror, Blackwater. It's like they are the Blackwater of finance, almost a shadow government. On the surface, you might think that what BlackRock did during the 2008 financial crisis was pretty sketchy and corrupt. But if you really think about it, what else was the government gonna do? They were at least partly responsible for the crisis because of their low interest rate policies. And they are not expert in these things like mortgage-backed securities. So it makes sense that they would turn to the man who helped pioneer these things in the first place, Larry Fink. I'm not saying it wasn't shady, but it's understandable why they would give these million-dollar contracts to someone like him. Fast forward to March 2020, when the pandemic hit and the economy started to crumble, once again BlackRock came to rescue. The Federal Reserve enlisted their help to bail out corporations that had taken on too much debt and needed to borrow money to stay afloat. And guess what? Many of those corporations had huge stake in BlackRock, which definitely raises some eyebrows about conflict of interest. In addition, BlackRock also helped the Fed purchase more mortgage-backed securities to stabilize the market. So once again, Larry Fink and BlackRock were at the center of the action, playing a critical role in the economy's recovery. What's next for BlackRock? Seems to be making a push towards more environmentally friendly and socially responsible investing. In the past, BlackRock's portfolio has heavily invested in industries with high pollution. However, the company is now expanding into more eco-friendly markets with new products and partnership with activist investors. They have even backed a shareholder resolution that forces ExxonMobil to address climate change. Fink has also written a letter to companies stating that they need to contribute to society to receive supports from his firm. This shifts towards sustainable investing, also known as ESG investing, is why we see so many corporations trying to appear socially conscious these days.
For environmental, social, corporate governance. And this is where the woke culture comes from. So they've created this kind of phony baloney rating system that says, well, if you, I'm exaggerating, but if you mention that you are, have a green agenda and you believe in carbon credits and you might trade some credit somewhere, then you get a higher score and therefore you're more investable.
And that brings us to the end of our exploration into enigmatic world of BlackRock. The question remains, are they part of an American oligarchy? The answer is elusive and the debate continues to range on. On one hand, the undeniable power and influence of BlackRock cannot be ignored. Their involvement in Wall Street bailouts and environmental investing speaks volumes, but is it all just a cleverly crafted facade? Are they truly as influential as they are made out to be? The truth eludes us. Do you think Larry and BlackRock are a part of an American oligarchy? Or is there more to their story? So please feel free to share your insights in the comments below.